Hey everyone, I'm Megyn Kelly. Welcome to this weekend special episode. Today we are bringing you my full conversation this week with my pal Tucker Carlson. We got into some very important topics like RFK and Trump potentially joining forces, and whether Tucker played a role in making that connection, and whether Tim Walz is creepy. And I want to tell you that I am joining Tucker on his live tour next month. I would love to see you all. He and I are going to travel to Kansas City, Missouri, together on September 12th at the T-Mobile Center, Kansas City, Missouri. Okay. Buy tickets now at tuckercarlson.com/events and see yours truly and Tucker there on September 12th. Enjoy, and I'll see you Monday. The reports are that you and Don Jr. and maybe one other have been working behind the scenes to convince RFK that there's no path forward for him in this particular race, which is, I mean, whether you tried that or not, that appears to be the case, and that he should drop out and endorse Donald Trump and potentially get a role in his administration. He has announced that he's going to be making an announcement on Friday. And when asked about this, he just refused to confirm or deny for now, but did say, I'm not going to say anything about Donald Trump when asked to condemn some of Trump's comments on climate change. So what would you like to say about these reports?
Well, I mean, I definitely didn't broker anything. That's not my role in life. I'm not good at that. I would never, I just wouldn't do it, go to Bobby and say, you can get this, and go to Trump and say, you should do that. I mean, my only role just in general is knowing a lot of people, liking a lot of people. I always try to connect people just in general. You should meet so-and-so, but I am not a political actor. I'm not good at it. I don't really understand politics. Most of my political predictions are wrong. I stay at 35,000 feet, which is the only place I'm comfortable or competent. And the second, I've been lured into saying, oh, this race in this state is going to go that way, I get humiliated because I don't really understand it very well.
Same.
So no, I didn't broker anything. I know them both well, and I really like Bobby Kennedy. I always have. I don't agree with him on everything, obviously, but I like his spirit, which is inquisitive, pretty honest, I would say, actually, for a politician, very honest, brave. I share a lot of the concerns he's articulated about health and the environment. I really care about the environment. I think climate change is not human caused. I disagree on that. I think that's ridiculous, actually. Climate is changing, but we're not doing it. But I'm very concerned about the quality of the air and water and the soil. Very concerned. I think we all should be. And the more you know, the more you are concerned. I'm really concerned by some of the drugs people put in their bodies. As a 22-year-long sober person, I really love sobriety. I, went to an AA meeting recently with Bobby Kennedy, had the best time ever. So we have a lot, and I'm a sportsman. I love hunting and fishing, and so does he. So we have just a lot in common personally, and that's the basis of our friendship and of my affection for him. On the political question, I've already said I have no idea what I'm talking about, and I really don't. But this is my one insight, which I do think is true, is I have no idea if he does endorse Trump. And these are two big personalities, so I'll kind of believe it when I see it. But if that happens tomorrow, I think it'll help Trump, probably. I don't really know. But I know for a fact that Bobby running third party would hurt Trump, because there is a big overlap in their voters. And it's not on all the issues. They disagree on a bunch of issues. But anyone who thinks the current system is corrupt is not voting for Kamala Harris, because she is, of course, the physical embodiment of corruption. And so you're voting for Bobby Kennedy or Donald Trump. That's the bottom line. And so I think if he stayed in the race, it would definitely hurt Trump. That's my analysis, for what it's worth.
There's a New York Post report out today that, 2 days ago it hit, talking about how Bobby Kennedy's affecting this race between Harris and Trump. And it's very telling. They're looking at some recent polling and saying that, take Arizona. Trump leads Kamala Harris by 1 point in Arizona, and Bobby Kennedy there taking 5%. So, I mean, important enough that he could definitely sway that race. In Michigan,
yes,
showing Trump it's basically tied, 45 to 44. Kennedy drawing 4% of the vote. Nevada, another nail biter, saying Trump leads Harris there 43 to 42, 6% behind Bobby Kennedy. North Carolina, 47 to 44 in Trump's favor, 2% backing RFK. So it is really interesting how tight it is. Pennsylvania, Harris leads Trump by 2 points. And Wisconsin, she leads him by 4 points. Kennedy's at 4% and 3% respectively. So this guy, he may not have the votes that he had maybe, 6 months ago when he was polling more like 11%, but he truly could swing this election if the people getting ready to vote for him did what he asked them to do and voted for, let's say, in this case, Trump.
Yes, I think that's right. And there's a whole kind of demographic in this country that's meaningful in numbers, and it's non-liberal nature people, kind of old-fashioned hippie types. They're not all into neoliberalism, actually. A lot of them still believe in civil liberties. They appreciate nature. They don't want to see it despoiled with chemicals. They don't think Monsanto's like a great company necessarily. And they look at Kamala Harris and who's not even a real person. I mean, it could be anybody, but they look at that machine financed by the banks and pharma, and they think to themselves, I don't have anything in common with these people. And they maybe look at Trump and they're like, who's that guy? He's weird. I don't like him either. But there are a lot of like right-wing hippies, actually, particularly in rural areas. They have guns. They live in rural areas. Of course, they use guns. And so I think those are all potential Trump voters. There are some style problems that turn them off to Trump, but they're definitely not on the side of like BlackRock at all. And Bobby Kennedy, and I live near a lot of people like this. I share a lot of their views. So I'm very familiar with this demographic. And I think that Bobby Kennedy is a pretty good way in to voting for Trump for them. He has credibility with them, and for good reason.
I share your concerns about what's happening with the environment and the toxins and the food supply and all that. And it's funny, Tucker, you'll laugh because I recently decided that I was going to stop getting pedicure. Like I get a pedicure, but I don't get toe polish. I don't get toenail polish. Yeah. And I'm like that, I don't want the top. Would you look at me? Would you look at the number of toxins I have on me right now in my hair? I'm like, not to mention the Botox. Like, what a charlatan I am. But, it's like around the edges, Tucker, we do what we can to try to minimize the toxins coming into our lives. Totally that is where I draw the line.
No, I mean, if I'm being honest, I come from a family like that. Like, what's in your toothpaste? What's in your deodorant? I mean, I'm 55. I grew up in California in the 70s where people were really concerned about this stuff. A lot of them were kind of dippy liberal people that we made fun of. And, I still make fun of them. On the other hand, those concerns turned out to be absolutely real. And if you look at the rates of chronic illness in this country, I mean, it's destroying the country.
Yep.
And I had a conversation last week with a woman called Casey Means, who's
I saw that. She's Callie's sister, right?
Callie's sister. Callie's a friend of mine and a wonderful guy. But his sister is one of the most powerful people I've ever interviewed in my, in 33 years of interviewing people. I've met very few people like Casey Means. First of all, she has the credibility, the authority. She's top of her class at Stanford Medical School. She's a surgeon, which is the highest level of medicine, obviously. And she left it all because she thought the system was so corrupt. But the compelling part of the interview for me was just the litany of health statistics that she threw out there. And the country's actually dying. And I sense that. I've read about it before, but I've never seen those stats collected in one place in the way that she did. And it's an emergency. It's an emergency that I would say supersedes all other emergencies. Sperm counts are down to 0 in a lot of men. Like, you can't continue the species. So what is causing this is the obvious question. Autism rates out of control to a much higher level than I ever realized. And so for all the people who said, how dare you speculate about what causes autism? Okay, I don't know what causes autism. I will freely concede that. But something is causing autism, actually. It's not just that the measurements have changed and we're counting autism cases. Like, no. The absolute number of autism cases is to an emergency level. And that's true for a lot of chronic conditions, and nobody cares. And so I'm just saying, as a political matter, there are a lot of people who care. And we put that interview up the other day. It's kind of an obscure topic. It has nothing to do with the election or the Ukraine war or inflation. And the response that we got suggested to me that a lot of people sense this is going on and they want someone to talk about it. And I hope if Bobby endorses Trump, and of course I hope he does, that he'll spend the next couple of months talking about this stuff in public, because somebody needs to.
This is one of his favorites. I mean, for sure. He's come on the show many times, and I've argued with him about why he doesn't pick up my favorite culture issues, and he tells me what his favorite issues are. And that's important too. I mean, what he's pushing, he's right. Nobody else is really talking about. And so
That's right.
It would be fascinating to see him come into a Trump administration with his unique views and experience. I mean, he made his bones as an environmental lawyer.
Yes.
And he's a true expert on that stuff. And I think Trump would listen to him on the things that he really is an expert on. And maybe we would have a different approach on some of this stuff. So we'll know soon. I think it would be a great move for him. We got 24 hours or so to figure it out. Okay, I got to talk to you. So much has happened since you last came on. JD Vance became Trump's running mate. I also heard you had something to do with that. That is brilliant, and I totally support that move. I know some Republicans they have their noses in a joint, but hopefully they're seeing what a great pick he was now when he's so deftly handling the media. He's everywhere. Last night he was in 5 different networks, and meanwhile, Tim Walz will only go in front of the golden microphone with her, as you say, not even real people. So what do you make, though, of the media pile-on against JD? Started with an interview he gave to you a couple years ago with a childless cat lady, right, comment. Nobody wanted to report the context, a snarky remark, but we went back and played the whole context of the original remarks that he'd made, what you guys were discussing. Nobody does that, though. So now they've demonized this guy as a woman hater, even though all his major role models and, mentors and the loving people in his life have been women. And as just say, he hates IVF, even though he's on record as saying he's pro IVF, he's against the ban. Like, all the stuff that they've been doing to him has been particularly nasty. So what do you think of it?
Well, I mean, the childless cat lady thing, I felt bad about. I'm pretty sure I haven't looked at the tape again, but I'm pretty sure I egged him on to say something like that. And I think it's a mean thing. I think I'm responsible for that. And I have a tendency to get way over my skis and get mean. And I regret that. It's very ugly. And I'm ashamed of the many, many times when I've said nasty things like that. I feel sorry for childless people, whether they have cats or not. And I mean it as someone who has 4 children who are the root of my happiness. I really feel compassion. And the whole point, the intended point, I may have distorted it in getting cable newsy and being nasty to people. But the whole point is we should be encouraging people to experience the things that make them the happiest. And I think any parent will tell you, as hard as it is having kids, like, that is one of the main sources of happiness for people from the beginning of time. And if we're discouraging that or making it impossible for people to have kids, that's on us. That's a major sin, and we should try to make it better. So I just want to say that I felt bad about that, and many other nasty things I've said over the years where I diminish people or make fun of their appearance. That's totally wrong. So I'm sorry. But I would say of JD Vance, it was hilarious because he's so weird. He hates women. He's like one of the only politicians I know, and I know a lot of politicians, who has a happy, normal marriage. He actually cares what his wife thinks. She's his partner, like actual partner. She's very smart and a really nice person, a cool person. And he isn't like a normal, happy marriage. I've actually been around it in private. If you brought a camera into JD Vance's household, you would see like a husband who loves his wife, a father who loves his children. Like, you really would. You can't say that for almost any other politician on either side. And I don't want to be mean. I've already said I don't want to be mean, but like that Walz guy is a creep. I'm just telling you that as someone who went to boarding school in the 80s. Like, I know exactly who that guy is. And I'm sorry. It's just, I hope I'm wrong. I don't think I am.
I mean, honestly, Tucker, why is he so obsessed with transing children, making it possible for them to separate from their parents and have their body parts chopped off? Hello?
Yeah. Well, I lived in a boys' dorm in a New England boarding school in the 1980s with a lot of guys like Tim Walz. Okay. So I saw that guy and I'm like, oh, wow, I know exactly. You're a creeper, as we used to call him, for sure. And, I guess I probably shouldn't. I definitely shouldn't suggest what I'm suggesting without evidence. I don't have evidence beyond what I've seen. So I just want to say that I'm probably, again,
do you mean like a pervert? Like, I don't, when you say creepy, like,
there's something wrong with that guy. He's a weirdo. He's a weirdo. And you can tell watching him. And I'm sorry, I've just lived long enough that I know that your gut level perceptions are rooted in truth. They're not always precisely true. I've gotten many things wrong. Like, the details are unknown to me, but I look at that guy and I'm like, you're a weirdo. And everyone's like, no, he's so normal. No, not normal. Sorry. And so,
well, there's another thing. There's another thing about Tim Walz that hasn't gotten as much airtime, and it's true. He actually did remove. They were coming up with the Minnesota human rights law and revising it, renewing it. You know, this class is protected. You can't discriminate against these people, and you can't discriminate against gays and lesbians. And the law had said, to be clear, pedophiles get no protection under this law. Pedophiles do not fall under the definition of a protected class. And they removed that language. They removed that language under Tim Walz, that the pedophiles, so it made it more ambiguous. Now, some of the LGBTQ community said, well, we removed that because we don't want to be associated with it. We don't need to say that right after you're talking about gay people. We shouldn't even be in the same breath as pedophiles. But it did make it more ambiguous. And some objected, saying, why would we take this out and make it less clear that we're not trying to protect pedophiles? In any event, it remained out, and Tim Walz signed that bill. I'm not saying he's a pedophile. I'm just saying you don't hear about this stuff from the mainstream media because they're so determined to tell us he's our dad.
And by the way, what is he doing in a high school setting with children, talking to them about their sex lives? Like, that's just prima facie wrong. It's totally wrong. And a healthy society would not tolerate that. You are not allowed to have teachers talking to kids about their sex lives. And I don't care if you're saying, oh, they're bullied. Okay. You know, but you're still, adults are not allowed to get involved in the sex lives of children unless they're the parents of those children, period.
He started the LGBTQ
so
alliance.
I just disagree with the entire thing. The gay straight alliance, like, are you an anti-gay bigot? Well, of course I'm not an anti-gay bigot. I am just against, across the board, creepy teachers talking to other people's children about those children's sex lives. That is totally wrong. And that is, I think that's criminally adjacent. Actually, I think it's a crime. And I don't think any normal father would put up with that. And you sort of wonder, like, where are the dads here saying, you talk to my child about his sex life one more time, I'm going to hurt you. That's the healthy response. Like, no. And I've just been around a lot. And again, I went to boarding school. I've seen this stuff. That is totally wrong. And who would do that? If somebody said to me, you know, there are kids in our school being bullied because of their sex lives, I'd be like, well, I'm totally opposed to bullying and cruelty and meanness. Yes. But no, I'm not going to sit around and talk to children about who they have sex with, because that's creepy. It's totally creepy. And no one can say
wants
that.
To introduce that topic to children. Even in the private setting, it's difficult enough when you have a parental obligation at some point to discuss it. In the school setting, when it's somebody else's kid, I mean, it's such a disgusting line to cross. But yes, he's crossed a few. I totally agree.
And the guy's like, oh no, I'm proud of that. No, you should be ashamed. It should not be allowed. It is the standard now in all schools where the school therapist or the nurse or some creepy football coach like Tim Walz gets to talk to your kids about their sex lives. And I would just say, no, they're not doing that in Romania. They're not doing that in China. Like, and those are not countries I want to live in, but they're countries that are rooted in like age-old common sense, which is that crosses a line. That line ends with, like, if you allow that line to be crossed, adults will have sex with kids. Okay. That is true. I'm not accusing Tim Walz of doing that. I have seen that personally, again, being in a boarding school where that happened. You know, I'm just going to mentor you and talk to you about your sexual identity struggles. And he's end up sleeping with a kid. Like, that's why we don't allow that. That's why I would never allow.
No, there's no question. There's no question that inappropriate sexual discussions with children is grooming. That it just is. And I realize they say, oh, they're bullied and we want to talk to them about it. It's not for you to do. It's not for you to do. And certainly not at the younger ages. That's for the parents to do, if at all. I mean, like, that's up to a mom and dad to discuss when and in what way those topics are discussed.
Exactly.
This gets me to something that happened when Obama was speaking the other night. Now, the reason I think this is interesting is because Obama is such an elitist, like, just prick. He doesn't realize how off-putting this kind of comment is. But I was like,
I love that summary, though. That's so good.
It just is. And so I was jarred by the comment. Then you showed up wearing a flannel shirt. And these two things made me pull this soundbite. And it ties in beautifully to the discussion we're having right now. Listen to him.
Tim is the kind of person who should be in politics. Born in a small town, served his country, taught kids, coached football, took care of his neighbors. He knows who he is, and he knows what's important. You can tell those flannel shirts he wears don't come from some political consultant. They come from his closet, and they have been through some stuff. They have been through some stuff.
It's like the inability to wrestle with who Tim Walz is when he's done in policy, one. And number two, like, look at the flannel. I mean, he's middle America, all right. Look at him in his flannel. This says Obama in his $4,000 suit.
It's also silly and superficial. So Obama likes his clothes. Okay. What? You know what I mean? This is a guy who let the biggest city in his state burn, whose wife said she enjoyed it, and she breathed deeply of the burning rubber, kept the windows open to do it. These are sick people. But more than that, like, if that's true, if the Democratic Party is the party of working people, then how come none of the working people are voting for Democrats anymore? You know what I mean? They have to vote for Republicans. And by the way, from my perspective, they shouldn't have to vote for Republican. The Republican Party, Mitch McConnell could care less about the opioid crisis, obviously. I don't think the Republicans represent them very well, but the Democrats have such contempt for them, such hatred for them, that rural people have had no choice but to vote Republican. I mean, the Democratic Party has gone out of its way to hurt them, actually, the white working class. That's just a fact. Put them at the bottom rung of medicine distribution during COVID, discriminated against them on the basis of like healthcare because of their skin color and their socioeconomic status. Like, they are truly hated by the Democratic Party. And I don't know Obama well enough to know what he actually thinks of them, but their policies have really hurt these people. And again, I live in an area that was Democrat because there was Mills. And these are not people who wanted to vote Republican. They didn't grow up voting Republican. Their grandparents didn't vote Republican. They're union members. And now they're mostly voting Republican because they have no choice. So, like, some lecture about Tim Walz's wardrobe that, Obama thinks is very snazzy, it's like so stupid, actually.
Well, maybe he wants them to vote for you too, because you got the checkered flannel. It looks flannel. I like it's like, just such an absurdity.
I grew up in La Jolla, California, in an affluent family. I never pretend I'm the voice of the working class. I'm the opposite of I spent my whole life in D.C., living in Northwest D.C. in an expensive house and having, lunch with senators every day. So, I mean, I'm hardly a representative of America's, dying working class at all. I like the people, I like the country, and I'm just trying to be honest about what I see. But the fraudulence there is so transparent. Like, who would fall for that? Actually,
well, now, I mean, they're trying to style him, as I said, into our dad. That was actually, I think, a Politico tweet. You're America's dad. I mean, it's like, no, we're good. And they're calling her Mamala, our dad and our Mamala. I'm like, these Democrats, like, really seriously looking for new parent figures in the absence of good ones of their own, I suppose. And I do wonder, like, what's wrong with us? Because most of us don't need new parents and aren't looking to some politician to step into the breach. And now today's line in the wake of the Tim Walz speech is, he is the definition of the non-toxic male. He's the anti-you, Tucker. He's the anti-Trump. He's the anti-JD Vance. He's like the soft man who still coaches football. I'll give you Dana Bash making this point last night on CNN.
But they are doing so in trying to put forward male figures, Tim Walz being one of them, Doug Emhoff last night, who can speak to men out there who might not be the sort of testosterone-laden, gun-toting kind of guy who wants to listen to Hulk Hogan and the kind of players that came out at the RNC, or might want to listen to that, but also, in addition, understand that it's okay in 2024 to be a man comfortable in his own skin.
What we saw at the Trump convention, which was, as you know, somebody, I forget exactly who said it, testosterone with Kid Rock and the Ultimate Fighting Champion guy.
Yeah, that guy.
And Hulk Hogan.
Dana White.
Yeah.
And all.
Remember, Hulk Hogan actually ripped off his shirt, and he had another shirt underneath, which I think is not exactly what the rip off the shirt thing is supposed to be. But in any case, I digress.
What do you make of it?
Well, it's just weird to me as someone who spent, almost a decade at CNN, that's their A team now. It's like sad, Really? Those Dana Bash is like doing political analysis. It's like, if you live long enough, you see how absurd things really are. As someone who knows Dana Bash. But leaving that aside, I think they're absolutely right. If you want weak men and the angry women around them, like that's the party for you for sure. Men who hate themselves. But I don't think that most people want that, actually. And they've spent 50 years trying to convince us that masculinity is dangerous. And so we live in a world with very little of it. And the society's become much more violent and much more unhappy and much more chaotic, actually. Masculinity, like femininity, is a product of nature. It's a good thing. We should never be against nature, the natural order. And of course, there are horrible men who are violent. And, all violence basically comes from men. That's bad. But that doesn't mean masculinity is bad. And if you want to know what happens without it, look around at modern America. It's a miserable country with angry people in it. And if you want more of that, vote for Tim Walz, who I just want to say once again, I'm totally convinced is creepy. I think I'll be vindicated. I hope I'm wrong, but I think he is. But whatever, he's clearly weak. And Doug Emhoff, his daughter, comes out on stage. I'm trying not to be mean, but I look at Doug Emhoff's daughter, miserable, covered in tattoos, and I'm like, anyone who has a child like that should not have political power, because you've messed up enough. Do you know what I mean? I do think that your personal life really matters. If you don't have a spouse who loves and respects you, if you don't have children who love and respect you, I feel sorry for you, but you definitely Tucker, can't have control over my life, because Doug you have not done a good job.
So he's the one. I mean, yes, there's a million articles calling Tim Walz our new dad and saying he's the kind of guy who would fix your flat tire for you. But Political, the most recent one was about Doug Emhoff. That's who it was. And they called him the headline was Meet Doug Emhoff, Dad in Chief. This guy who cheated on his first wife by banging the nanny, impregnating her, and there was either an abortion or an abandoned child, and they actually want us to swallow him as our dad. You know what? My dad was a good dad who never cheated on my mom, who never impregnated another person, who never had an abortion with an affair. You go down the line. This is sick. Why are they looking at these men as like their new daddy figures?
Well, because that's the whole program of the party. I mean, the party is the most important thing. That's really the story of Kamala Harris. I don't spend a lot of time beating up on Kamala Harris because I don't think she's a significant figure. She just happened to be there. What we've seen over the past 6 weeks is what actually matters in the Democratic Party, which is not individuals, their charisma, their ideas, their program. It's the party itself. The party itself is more important than any single person in the party. The individual doesn't matter. It's the collective. And that collective, in their view, should replace everything else and should be the subject of your first and primary loyalty. In other words, your parents violate COVID law, your brother violates COVID law, you rat them out to the party, to the state, because the party is the most important thing. So of course they think that whoever runs the party should be mom or dad, because the party is more important than the church, than the family, to your friendships, to your work. I mean, it's got to be the center of your loyalty. And this is just the totalitarian worldview. It's always been the same. It was the same in the Soviet era. It was the same during the revolutionary era in France and Spain. In every country that's ever had a revolution, whether it's communist or whatever they call it, the names don't mean anything because it's the same idea. It's the party replaces God and family and personal loyalty. And so, yeah, of course, it could be, it doesn't matter who's the head of the party. That person should be dead. And that's why the Democratic Party spends so much time trying to destroy all of their pre-existing loyalties, primarily the family and the church. Mm-hmm. That's why they've got a vasectomy lab at the DNC, because, of course, having kids makes you realize, like, my kids are more important than anything else. obviously.
And women
They're more
parading,
important than-
and men parading down the street as mifepristone abortion pills, literally
Yeah, of
in
course.
costumes that are the abortion
course.
pill. Oh my God.
Yeah, I mean, you really realize it's actually been an amazing and instructive experience to watch this and just to watch the last couple of years, because they've admitted what's really important. Like, I always thought they were for abortion because, I don't know, they felt sorry for the 14-year-old who got raped, which I do too, of course. So I get that. But it had nothing to do with that. They like abortion for its own sake because it prevents childbirth, because it prevents new life from coming into the world. They're for it on its own terms. It's a positive good to them. Now, you can be as pro-choice as you want and still think that's the most grotesque attitude possible. Like, they're just for human sacrifice. They're for killing for its own sake. They're opposed to children. Like, what's the other explanation?
Honestly, there are some. They're not all that way, but there are some.
No, they're not.
And that's why they run around with, I'm proud of my abortion. I love my abortion. And they're touting the fact that they've killed 25 in utero babies just this week alone. They're proud of it. 25 abortions have taken place outside of the DNC. As they're, talking to us about joy, they're literally killing babies outside and then bragging about it.
So how is that not a religion? I mean, that's a religion. That's not a political movement. Obviously, it's nothing to do with politics, actually. They're worshiping something. They're worshiping the death of human beings. So that's the oldest religion there is, actually, is the religion that tells you by killing, you get joy. I mean, this is like age old. At the beginning of recorded history, every civilization has practiced human sacrifice, every single one, and on every continent. And you can ask yourself, like, why? What is that exactly? Which is a whole nother conversation. But that's just factually true. And that's what we're seeing here. This is not political. It's religious.
Why do you think that in the past week, when the Democrats have controlled the airwaves, and their ratings have been very good for this Democratic National Convention, the betting odds on who's going to win this election have swung 10 points to Donald Trump's favor? Let me give you the rundown.
Yes.
June 28th, post the disastrous debate for Biden, they showed Trump up 33 points over Joe Biden. This is the betting odds. June 15th, after the attempted assassination, Trump up 48 points over Joe Biden. July 22nd, the day it became obvious Harris was going to be subbed in, Trump up 26, so he's starting to fall. August 16th, which was last Friday, Harris up 8.6, which had been a huge swing in her favor, reflecting what happened in the media and the coronation and her not speaking to anybody. And then in the past week, Trump is now up 2, a 10-point swing in his favor, as she has dominated the airwaves and all the Democratic all-stars, Tucker, Michelle, Barack, Oprah, Tim Walz, Nancy, and the numbers are going like this, at least on the betting odds.
It's hard to understand the collective wisdom of markets. I often don't understand it. I can only guess. I think those are amazing numbers, though. Thank you for reading those. But my sense is that people know this is as good as it's going to get for the Democratic Party. I mean, they literally have control of the airwaves for a full week in a stage-managed production, a propaganda show, which is what all conventions are. And it's probably not going to get better than what it is right now. Like what else can they do? Like, have more abortions between now and November? Like,
go for 50.
You know what I mean? Like, what else is there? There isn't actually a program that uplifts or helps people. I do think there's the sense that the economy is in actual peril, that we're just kind of holding it together with masking tape until the inevitable collapse. And what's their answer for that? You know what I mean? Like, higher capital gains tax or unrealized gains tax. Like, they don't have an answer, actually. They're just putting pressure on Powell. I mean, like, our entire economic program in the United States seems to be manipulating the Federal Reserve on interest rates. Like, that's it. There's no other answer. And that's obviously an inadequate answer. So, I mean, that would be my guess, that people looking at the fundamentals know that they're out of tricks. And maybe abortions in the parking lot won't be enough in the end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, maybe they're starting to feel the economic pain that's hitting the news day by day. Yeah. You saw the report yesterday that they had to revise the jobs report downward, almost 1,818,000. They had overstated new jobs created. This is all puffery, and now the truth is coming out. And then the Commerce Department head goes on with ABC, and she gets asked about this downward revision by the Department of Labor. They played her a soundbite of Trump saying there'd been a downward revision of 800,000 plus. And they asked her, how about it, lady? And listen to Gina Raimondo.
I'm curious as to your thoughts on today, the Bureau of Labor saying that more than 800,000 fewer jobs were actually created than initially reported. And we have a soundbite here just to play. We can listen to it together because Donald Trump is already addressing this on the campaign trail. So let's take a listen to that one together.
The administration padded the numbers with an extra, listen to this one, 818,000 jobs that don't exist. So they said they existed, and they never did exist. They built them up so that they could say what a wonderful job they're doing.
So when you hear that, do you potentially think that this new numbers could be a liability for this campaign?
No, when I hear that, first of all, I don't believe it because I've never heard Donald Trump say anything truthful.
It is, though, from the Bureau of Labor.
I'm not familiar with that.
She's not familiar. Two additional points. She's been reportedly considered for Treasury Secretary in the Kamala Harris administration. It's just Treasury, this woman who's never heard of the Bureau of Labor report. And that story was ignored by all of the big three media last night on their evening news, except ABC gave it 10 seconds.
It's just crazy to me that Gina Raimondo was the governor of Rhode Island, a state I used to live in. I'm pretty familiar with it. That she was rewarded with a cabinet seat after what she did in Rhode Island. Like, there's no connection between achievement and advancement anymore. Like, the meritocracy really is dead in the United States, which is the
Look
core
at Kamala.
problem. Yeah, well, exactly. But Gina Raimondo was a governor. Like, you can, she did not help Rhode Island at all. And I think she's smart, and she was famously moderate and all this stuff. And like, she was pretty promising as a governor, I thought. She's Democrat. I didn't vote for her or anything, but she could have made that state much better, and she didn't. It got worse. So how the hell did she get in Biden's cabinet? Right. First thing. Second thing, it's not about Trump. Notice she just he's a liar. Okay. Whatever. But you're lying about basic economic stats. And that is really the problem. That's the corrosive problem. If you can't even trust the numbers coming out of the government, if everything is a lie, from how Trump almost got assassinated to how Kamala Harris got the nomination to Joe Biden's health to basic numbers on employment or the CPI or whatever, if all the numbers are cooked, if everything is political, then you just don't have a functional society actually at that point. Like, I think we're really tampering with the formula here. Like, the Secret Service cannot be a political instrument. Neither can the FBI or DOJ. No, you can't lie about every fundamental number, something as simple as how many people have jobs. You can't do that, or else the whole thing will fall apart. 250 years of effort to build this society, and you could lose it if you do stuff like that. And they are. Mm-hmm. And everyone kind of knows it. It's freaking me out watching this.
You mentioned my FBI. One of the things, of course, that going back to our earlier discussion, RFKJ has been railing about is the, intelligence community and how corrupt he thinks they are. Don Jr. was on with Glenn Beck yesterday and said he loves the idea of RFKJ as head of CIA or doing something to take apart these organizations and start rebuilding them. What do you make of that idea? Yeah. If you Tucker Carlson could wave a magic wand and say, this is what I would use RFKJ for, what would it be?
Well, I'd give him declassification power immediately. I don't even know if that's legal under federal law, but I would
but
try to get
your magic wand.
Oh, I would look. I think one of the biggest. I think one of the reasons we have such a corrupt society at this point is because secrecy makes it possible. Secrecy. We have no privacy. It's so interesting. We have no privacy. You keep your iPhone in your bedroom, and someone can listen to you. Talking to your spouse. Okay, no privacy at all. But we have more secrecy than ever. The people in charge have created a system where nothing they do can ever be evaluated because you're not allowed to know what they're doing in your name with your money. Over 1 billion classified federal documents. That means, by definition, it's a corrupt system. So I do think going forward, if we're going to save the country, fix the system, have a government that we can believe in, be proud of, sort of, anyway, you need to declassify a lot. beginning with 9/11, like, I'm sorry, everyone attacks the 9/11 conspiracy theories. I have no idea the truth, by the way. I'm not suggesting I do, but I do know that 23 years later, if we have, the bulk of the documents still classified, the question is why? It's not to preserve sources and methods. That's not relevant. It's to protect the guilty. Same with the JFK files. Same with
I was going to say, let's go back further than 9/11. Let's start with
exactly
JFK.
Right. So like, there's no justification. And people like Pompeo, who in my opinion is evil, but we can disagree on that. But Pompeo, it was absolutely part of that. I mean, Pompeo is the reason the JFK files weren't declassified. The reason we still don't really understand a lot about 9/11. That happened in my lifetime. I had 3 kids on 9/11. This just happened. Like, I have a right to know. This changed our country. How do I not have a right to know what the truth is? And so if you got someone like Bobby Kennedy in there who, his uncle was definitely murdered with the knowledge of CIA. I can say that conclusively. There are questions about how his father was murdered and by whom. He has a personal sort of mission to declassify this stuff. And I would love to see that. I think his life would be in peril if he tried that. I think he'd do it anyway, which speaks to his courage. So yeah, I love the idea of him running CIA, or at least having the power to declassify. And last thing I'll say, if Trump gets elected, it's absolutely essential that a tool of permanent Washington doesn't take a job like CIA director. Like, you need to have someone who cares about the country more than the federal agency. That's absolutely essential. And the people I see in the running for CIA director, some of whom I like, and I know them all, but, they're people who absolutely don't think you have a right to know what your government is doing, who would continue to hide basic facts. Mike Pompeo, when he was CIA director, plotted an assassination of Julian Assange. That's a fact. He plotted the assassination. Now, he's a federal appointee. Julian Assange hadn't even been charged with a crime in the United States. You are not allowed to murder people in my name with my money. That's a crime. Of course, he's never going to be indicted for it. He should be today. He never will be. But we didn't even know that. There's so much stuff that we don't know. We have a right to know. This is our government. It does not belong to Mike Pompeo or to Joe Biden or Kamala Harris or anybody. It belongs to all of us. That's what democracy is. And if we allow this to continue, then let's just stop calling it democracy. Let's just call it the autocracy that it demonstrably is. That's my view.
All right. Now, speaking of Trump, I got to ask you about him. They almost killed him since the last time you and I spoke on the air. And you did a wonderful job at the Republican National Convention. I said, even before you came on, that you were the best one. I love that you spoke extemporaneously without notes, from the heart. It's so much better than these scripted speeches, which are just so painful to listen to. No matter how compelling the figure is, it's like, okay, just talk to me like a human. But most people are incapable of doing it. So hats off. But one of the things you said was that you believe Trump had changed in the wake of that horrible event. And then Trump got out there himself and said, well, here's Trump shortly thereafter in SOT 17.
It'd be nice. They all say, I think he's changed. I think he's changed since 2 weeks ago. Something affected him. No, I haven't changed. Maybe I've gotten worse, actually, because I get angry at the incompetence that I witness every single day, the way millions of people are pouring into our country.
What do you make of that?
He just cracks me up. I mean, I just should say with the caveat that I'm charmed by Trump. Personally, I like Trump. I can't help myself. He just makes me laugh. I was just noting the obvious, which is you can't go through something like that without being changed. I've never been shot, but like every person, I've been through. Every person who makes it to his or her 50s goes through like unexpected events. Well, that was kind of shocking. And at first, you think, well, I'm fine. I'm totally the same person. And then over time, you realize, no, that changed me. That changed my perceptions of things, my assumptions about things, my reaction to things. I'm thinking thoughts I had never thought before. I mean, it's just kind of inevitable. And, nobody could go through that without being changed. How will he be changed? My sense at the convention, just because I talked to him every day when I was there, was that he was thinking a lot more about eternal questions, which I think is really important for all of us to be brooding on every day personally. But I think he was thinking about that more. How will it change him long term? I don't know. But I can just say, again, I've never been shot or anything like that. But every traumatic, unexpected thing that's ever happened to me, things I didn't want to happen, including getting fired a bunch, they've all been great. Like it's good for you. It's good for you to have your cage rattled. I think it's been great for me. I can tell you that.
Yeah. I mean, I think he's right when it comes to the political fight, right? It's like, how can he be super sweet and nice when they're calling him Hitler, they're calling him a racist every day, a misogynist every day? This is from the Democratic National Convention. This is from the nice people, Michelle Obama.
Yeah.
He's a racist, he's a misogynist, but it's really important to be respectful. Same person, same speech, right? So I personally don't see how Trump is nice in trying to win the presidency. No one is. This is not a situation where niceness wins. And that leads me to my last question, which is a lot of Republicans are starting to feel a little blue, maybe less blue today than they were a week ago, because I think you can feel the bloom coming off the Kamala Rose. You know, like she was anointed and she was the second coming. And now it's kind of like, well, it's not just the betting odds, but the polls are starting to correct too. And it's a very, very tight race. And you heard Michelle, Barack, everybody's starting to say that now, encouraging their base to get out. But for Republicans who are feeling down because they were soaring when he was against the declared Democratic nominee, the one who was actually voted on, and now things have shifted. What say you? How do you see this thing going from over the next 70 days?
Well, I think the outcome is unknown. I mean, I think you summed it up really well. You can't know. It is really close. There are all kinds of other factors that, no one wants to talk about, including me, but, you've got a totally different population by over 10 million people from the one you had in 2020. Yeah. So that's kind of hanging in the air. Will these non-citizens here legally breaking our laws, yet fully federally subsidized, will they be able to vote? I don't know the answer. I certainly hope not. So I don't know. I'm praying for a return to a country that's defined by justice, fairness, and civil liberties. I definitely am praying for that every day. But I don't want to pass the question. I just don't know the answer. But I would say it's really important to remember, as you're outwardly focused, that what matters first and foremost is how the people around you are doing. The people you love, that you come into contact with every day. If you're blessed enough to have children and a spouse, them. But everyone has relatives, everyone has coworkers, everyone has friends or people they care about. How are they doing? I do think that's so important. We kind of externalize a lot of our lives. Like, I meet people all the time who are way more pissed about what's happening politically on both sides than they are about, like, a nephew who's got a drug addiction or whatever, or about a bad marriage that they're in. What matters is how actual people are doing, beginning with the people in your orbit. And so I just think in general, it's especially during election season, it's really important to remember that. And I see political extremists, most of them on the left, not entirely, but mostly, who externalize to such an extent that they're way more worried about the climate or Donald Trump or Darfur or Palestine than they are about actual people. And that is a sin. Like, we're required to care about actual people, beginning with the ones put in our path for a reason. Like, people around you for a reason, actually. And you just remember that. And so before you fret about politics, try and serve someone next to you, not a theoretical person in a faraway place, but the kind of annoying, complicated person you're not getting along with right next to you.
I got to leave it at that because we're out of time, Tucker. So great to see you. And more between Tucker and yours truly. Oh, you are. In Kansas City, Missouri. Don't forget, September 12th, T-Mobile Center. Buy tickets now at tuckercarlson.com/events and check them out tonight. Live coverage of the DNC, tuckercarlson.com.